Mitch, I got to tell you, I was pretty impressed with the acrobatics of getting on the stage. That was quite good. And I want to say, Rita, thank you. First for a gracious introduction, and then for the kindness of singing Happy Birthday to me. I was born back in none of your business. It's been a while ago. Actually, I'm 52 years old today, and you're supposed to go, ooh, ah, you don't look it. Apparently you think I look a lot older than that, and that kind of hurts. It really does. Well, what an honor to be here today, and I know you're going to have a great weekend. People from all over America gathering together and here in the Midwest, and I want to especially say a word of thanks to my friends from Iowa who a couple of weeks ago gave me a great boost in the Iowa straw poll that to some people said it didn't mean a lot. Well, it meant a lot to us, and we were pretty excited about it. And many of you from Iowa who are here, if you voted for me in the straw poll, God bless you and keep it up. If you didn't, we're going to give you another chance in the caucuses, and you better do right then. So, a few years ago, I was speaking at Mountain Home, Arkansas, at the Lincoln Day dinner, and I was lieutenant governor at the time, and had been in the office about a year, and was running for re-election because I was elected in this special election, and therefore I was having to immediately turn around and run again. And Dick Holman, who was the chairman of the Baxter County Republican Committee, had invited me up, and when I got there, I realized there was a buffet line, so I thought it'd be pretty smart to stand at the place where they had to all come through, pick up their plates, get their food before they went into the event. And I stood there and shook every hand as people came through, picked up their plate, got their food, and then were seated. When all of them had been seated, I reached over and got a plate, headed to go to the buffet line. Young man working for the hotel caterer looked over and said, "Excuse me, do you have a ticket?" And I said, "Well, no, actually, I don't have a ticket. I'm the speaker tonight." He said, "Oh, that's great. But you need a ticket if you're going to eat." And I said, "Well, you know, you probably don't recognize me. I'm Mike Huckabee. I'm lieutenant governor, and I'm the guest speaker tonight. They've invited me, and they didn't send me a ticket." He said, "Oh, you're lieutenant governor. Wow, that's pretty cool. You're going to have a ticket if you're going to eat that." I realized I wasn't getting anywhere with this young man, so I gave up, and I went on up to the head table and sat down. This is a true story now. I sat down with Dick, and he looked over and he saw I didn't have a plate. He says, "Mike, were you not hungry?" I said, "Well, Dick, actually I was. But I said the young man back there in the dining room said that if I didn't have a ticket, you know, I couldn't get a plate." You could see the color just going out of Dick's face. Embarrassed. He jumped up. He was ready, I know, to go back and ream that young man out. I grabbed him by his coat sleeve. I pulled him back down in his chair. I said, "Dick, sit down. You're not going to say a word to that young man, because that's the first teenager I've seen in a long time who did exactly what he was told to do." You know, a lot of people wonder why Republicans had such a tough year last year. It was a tough year. We went from having the majority in both the House and the Senate, Washington, to being in the minority. A year ago, we had the majority of all governorships in the country. Now we're in the minority. We've had the majority of state legislative bodies. Now we struggle. And next year, there are some who predict that we'll have a hard time keeping the White House. I'm one of several Republicans going to do our best to make sure that doesn't happen, that we lose that too. But I want to remind you that when Republicans do what they're told to do by the people who elect them, they stay elected. It's when Republicans don't do what they're told to do is when they get beat. When Republicans didn't control spending, and we forgot to stand diligently against corruption, and when we do not express a level of competence with the manner in which we govern, we get in trouble. Now, the good news for us is this new Congress, under the leadership of Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, has an approval rate that's the lowest Congress has ever had, which is pretty amazing considering some of the low approval ratings Congress has had. I'm deeply grateful for their low approval ratings, because it may be the best hope we have next year to take back to Congress, which I hope we do. But lest you think I come here today as a pessimist, let me quickly tell you, not one bit. If anything, I'm quite optimistic about our party, but I'm even more optimistic about our nature. And the reason I am is because this nation is, in fact, still, with all of its problems, the greatest place on earth. And if you don't think it is, think about this. We now are still a nation where we are seriously looking at and needing to do something to secure our borders. Not because we're trying to keep people from breaking out, but because we have to keep people from breaking in. It's still the most popular place on earth for a person to put his or her feet, and for good cause. I was asked by a reporter recently if I was having a good time running for president. I said, I'm having a great time. They said, you seem to be. Why? I said, why wouldn't I be? Think about it. I know where I've come from. I understand something about the path that's led me to this point. I did not grow up a child of privilege. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I kind of would have enjoyed it if I'd had the chance. But that wasn't my lot in life. I tell people I didn't grow up blue blood. I grew up blue collar. My dad was a fireman, worked for the city of Hope, Arkansas. There wasn't enough money in that job, so he had a second job. He worked as a mechanic on his days off, and there wasn't a day in my dad's life when he didn't have the work of the day on his hands, and no matter how hard he scrubbed, he couldn't quite get it off. The only soap we ever had in our house was lava soap. For those of you who don't fully understand that, that means I was in college before I found out that a shower isn't supposed to hurt. The fancy word today is exfoliation. We just called it a bath. When I was 8 years old, my dad took me to meet the governor of Arkansas. He was coming down to make a speech in Hope. We lived in the far southwest corner of the state where the city is, and governors never came down to our part of the state. We were so far from the capital of Little Rock. And I remember what he said to me. He said, now, son, the governor's coming to dedicate a lake, and I'm going to take you down there to hear his talk because, son, you may live your whole life and you may never get to meet a governor in person. If somebody had ever told him that his son would have become the 44th governor of the state and would have one day run for president, I'm sure he would have thought, that's right, and I'm going to fly the space shuttle and do brain surgery someday. I'm like a lot of American kids. I'm living better today than my parents could have ever hoped. And frankly, the reason is because of the sacrifices they made for me. The older I get, and even though my father has been gone for over 11 years, I'm still learning almost every year new things about the sacrifices that he and my mother made so I could have a better life than them. I'm the first male in my entire family lineage to even graduate high school, much less go on to college. Like so many of you, if you asked me today, are you living better than you ever dreamed you would be as a kid? Man, my hand would be the highest one in the air today. But I've sometimes asked rooms of people like this, do you think your kids and your grandkids are going to be living better than you? And sometimes it really is pretty sad when not a single hand goes up in the air. And ladies and gentlemen, I believe the party that can lead this country back to its sense of resilience and optimism and hope for the future is the party that not only will win, but the party that has a right to have earned the capacity to govern this country and to lead us not to days that are just okay, but to remembering that the greatest generation doesn't have to be the generation that's already come behind us. It ought to be the one that's yet even to be born.